Off the coast of Florida, the search for two fishermen who disappeared on a fishing trip is now a recovery mission.
Something is taking people, and it's apparently getting weirder and weird by the day.
I felt like there was something seriously wrong. It was only a matter of seconds before I realized that these weren't human doctors. This was an alien face.
Fisherman abducted by dolphins.
This photo is being shared across social media. He was kidnapped by dolphins.
Mermaid abducting mariners and ordinary people claiming to have encountered real aliens.
2 days ago, I had extraterrestrial contact experience where an extraterrestrial shared some information about the Pleiadian prophecy with me.
Today, we're diving into disappearances, abductions, and encounters that left many speechless.
Last October, in the quiet Mississippi town of Pascagoula, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by three unearthly creatures.
Off the coast of Florida, the search for two fishermen who disappeared on a fishing trip is now a recovery mission. The Coast Guard found their boat far offshore, but that is all.
In December 2025, Randall Spivey, 57, and his nephew Brandon Billmeyer, 33, left Fort Myers on a Friday morning for a routine fishing trip. Their 42-foot boat was found drifting 70 miles off the Florida coast, empty. The U.S. Coast Guard launched a search and eventually suspended it, leaving their fate unknown. But what unsettled people most was the location. 70 miles out, deep in waters where dolphin activity runs unusually high. Some who followed the case speculated that they might have been abducted by dolphins.
Late today, the Coast Guard told us that they've suspended their search for the two men. The investigation into what happened is still ongoing.
Alien abduction.
It was in the middle of the night. I was dead asleep, and I just remember waking up. I just saw this large head hovering over top of me. And I started to realize that the head that I saw wasn't necessarily humanoid looking.
Back in 2012, a woman named Elizabeth from Los Angeles said she had a terrifying encounter. She woke up at night and saw a large, non-human head above her. Then she noticed three beings in her room. They held her ankle and wrists, pulled her from bed, and took her into the hallway.
There was three of these beings who physically were in the room, and there was one of them on my left ankle, one of them on my right wrist, and then the other on my left wrist. And then the next thing I remember, they were literally dragging me from my bed, carrying me out into the hallway.
Her next memory was sitting frozen in a metal chair inside what looked like a spacecraft. She could not move or speak. A machine pushed a small tube into her right ear. Later, she woke in bed with a drop of red fluid on her ear. She believed the beings were Pleiadians, aliens involved in a hybrid program.
The only part of the experience that I don't fully recall is how we got from the hallway up to their ship. So I even remember them putting me into this very stiff metal chair in the middle of this room. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I was paralyzed, I don't know what they did to me. So I saw this machine, and I saw that coming from the machine was this cylindrical mechanism. And as it got closer to me, it got smaller and smaller until it went into my right ear. I had a sense that they were chipping me. I remember them putting me into my bed. I just go over to my ear, and there's just one drop of blood.
Stolen children.
The most interesting event was actually years ago where I became pregnant and I got a pregnancy test positive.
Were you, I know this is kind of personal, but were you and your partner trying to have children?
No, we weren't trying to have children.
You were thinking it could possibly be a child from your partner.
Exactly. Next thing you know, I have a miscarriage and there's no fetus, there's nothing.
Geraldine Orozco had been getting positive pregnancy tests for years, only to miscarry each time with no fetus ever found. Doctors had no explanation. Then, on 2013, she woke at 3:30 in the morning to blinding light flooding her bedroom. Her body was paralyzed, and she felt herself pulled through the window and into a craft.
In 2013, I had a conscious experience in my bedroom. I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I wake up because there's a bright light in my room. And as I look down at my phone, it says 3:30 in the morning. And part of me was a little bit afraid at that moment because it was thinking, oh, is there someone outside my window? So I look outside my window, and the light is so bright that it's burning my eyes. And next thing I know, my entire body paralyzes. and I feel my body being taken through the window.
Inside, tall grey beings with giant eyes stood around her. What happened next shook her to her core. They brought children to her. Hybrid children. Children who looked like her but weren't fully human. She believed her pregnancies were never miscarriages. Her unborn children had been taken.
I was brought to a craft. I was paralyzed. This being comes next to me, and I'm terrified at this point, but I can't even scream. This being is showing me these children. And as I'm looking at these children and I see what they look like, they're not all the way human. This gray, thin skin, a much bigger head, and these giant eyes that are so deep and so profound and so complex. It was just incredible. But what I recognized as I'm meeting the child is that it's my child. It looks like me. It has something that is a part of me.
Amazon abduction. On September 17th, 2023, explorers visiting a remote village deep in the Amazon rainforest filmed something that stopped everyone cold. High above the tree line, a bright beam of light descended from an unidentified craft and appeared to lock onto a single figure on the ground below. Within moments, the person was gone, pulled upward into the light as the craft disappeared. The villagers had no explanation. The explorers had it on camera. Whatever came down over that rainforest that night left without asking permission. Strange transformation. Security cameras inside a federal building in Washington, D.C. caught something nobody expected. A hooded figure appeared in the video before a man in a black suit approached him. He was checking his arms methodically, as if running through some kind of pre-mission protocol. At first, they were talking normally. Then the hooded figure reached into his pocket, pulled something out, and within seconds, his entire body began convulsing violently. He dropped to the ground and dissolved into a fine powder where he stood. The man in the black suit walked away without breaking stride. Viewers online claimed he was an alien disguised as a human. Flying saucer. A man standing on his balcony in Acapulco, Mexico City, filmed something he could not explain. High above the rooftops, a large metallic disc-shaped craft hovered motionless against the gray sky. It was flat on top, domed underneath, with no visible means of propulsion or sound. Then something even stranger happened. A small dark figure appeared below the craft, rising slowly upward toward it as if being pulled. Seconds later, the craft accelerated straight up and vanished. Whitley Strieber's abduction.
I was awakened by a whooshing sound, and I heard it. I sat up. Maybe it crossed my mind that it might be the dishwasher. I'd had an alarm system installed in the house, so I was confident that no one could get in. As I woke up, I became immediately aware of a presence. I was gone. I was blacked out. After the blackout, something happened to my body. I didn't feel anything. I could feel my core being, my inner self, but there was nothing happening on the surface. I was like paralyzed and I had lost sensation.
On December 26, 1985, author Whitley Strieber woke in his isolated cabin in upstate New York to a whooshing sound and blacked out instantly. He came to on what felt like a craft, completely unresponsive, surrounded by small, narrow-faced figures with massive black eyes. A needle went into his head. Something entered his body. His doctor examined him the next morning and said the evidence looked like assault. Under hypnosis, buried memories surfaced, visions of apocalypse, his deceased father, and his son in danger. He wrote it all down and believed he was abducted by aliens.
Then I remember a feeling like going up in a fast elevator, and I saw the trees whipping past beside me. It happened so fast, I didn't get a chance to gather myself together, and I blacked out again. That's how it started. I found myself waking up. I couldn't move, and these figures began to dart around. Then I began to see these faces, big, long, narrow faces with big black eyes, but it opened the box, and there was a long, needle thing in the box. They said that they were going to put this into my head, and it scared me to death. It was devastating. After they inserted the needle into my head, then the really unpleasant part physically began. They inserted something into me. I blacked out.
Alien ambush.
The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. Had been one of their internal bases. and we drilled holes right on top of it.
In late August of 1979, while drilling tunnels in Dulce, New Mexico, Phil Schneider was lowered into one of the shafts and came face to face with a 7-foot-tall gray alien.
About from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine.
He reached for his weapon and took down 2 of them. One raised its hand and discharged a blue energy beam that destroyed his fingers, devastated his foot, and tore open his chest. A green beret behind him shoved him into the basket and hit the lift, saving his life at the cost of his own. 66 military personnel never made it out. Schneider spent years telling this story publicly before dying under disputed circumstances in 1996.
When I saw green beret and black beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up. The gig was up. First of all, I knew all about the alien agenda.
Pleiadian contact.
Hey everyone. 2 days ago, I had extraterrestrial contact experience where an extraterrestrial shared some information about the Pleiadian prophecy with me and shared some other very interesting things with me. And I made a video about that as well 2 days ago, right after the experience. So I'll have that tagged below for anybody who hasn't seen it yet and is interested.
A young man named Nathan Lindsay claimed that 2 days before recording his video, he had direct contact with an extraterrestrial being. He said the being told him about something called the Pleiadian prophecy. According to Nathan, he carries a gift from the Pleiadians. However, he said this gift is not something only he can have. Instead, it is a kind of awareness that most humans have not yet awakened to. Nathan said the prophecy has been misunderstood by many people. He believes humans have added their own fear to it, imagining war, conflict, or danger. But according to him, the Pleiadians are not coming to fight, save, or fix anyone. They are only here to help humans understand that much of reality is shaped by collective fear, trauma, and inner projection. He also claimed that he has repeatedly woken up in what he calls a dimension of pure creation. In this place, he says he can consciously reshape events in his life, almost like rewriting a script. Nathan believes everyone does this in some way, but the difference is that he remembers it.
So, essentially, the things that I know for sure, this extraterrestrial, like legit, straight up communicated to me in this experience, is that they said, I have a gift that's been passed down to me from the Pleiadians. It was also shared with me that the Pleiadian prophecy is true, but that humans have completely colored it with their own kind of dirt, and that the real power and what's going on has been kind of misconstrued, and that people are confused about it right now and might be believing and thinking that certain things are supposed to be happening or going to happen that actually aren't. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you.
Strange sky anomaly. A group of friends hiking near Hohenzollern Castle in the Swabian Alps of southwestern Germany left with their jaws dropped when something appeared above the ancient stone ruins. A strange object hovered overhead, emitting an unusual glow beneath its body. Below it, a luminous white figure rose slowly upward toward it, as if being drawn in. Then, without warning, the object discharged a sudden flash of light across the sky and shot upward at a speed nothing man-made could match. The friends stood frozen, with no explanation for what they had just witnessed. Abduction by mermaids.
Ligat wata mo ma tas tumawi.
9 years ago, a shocking incident happened to a man who took off his clothes and entered the Mutarikwe River in Masvingo, Zimbabwe, and mysteriously never returned. Jeremy Wade, a British television presenter, interviewed the man's wife, who claimed he was dragged into the water by mermaids. She described the creature as looking like humans with long black hair, a fair complexion, and a fish-like tail. Was he dragged into the water by mermaids or some other scary water monster? Since no trace has been found so far, this mystery is still waiting to be resolved. Strange river creature. A man fishing in the Chattahoochee River in Georgia mistakenly dropped his phone into the murky water and went in after it. As he pushed deeper, something else caught his attention. Moving slowly through the darkness was a creature with vivid blue, scaled skin, a long sweeping tail, and what appeared to be a distinctly human upper body. He surfaced, grabbed whatever camera he had, and got it on film. The clip spread fast when he posted it on YouTube, with most viewers convinced it was a mermaid, but I would like to know your opinion on it. Alien encounter. Elizabeth Clara was born in 1910 in Moy River, Natal, South Africa, and became a famous flying saucer contactee in the 1950s. She said her first UFO sighting happened in 1917, when she was 7 and saw a huge craft above her family's farm near the Drakensberg Mountains. More sightings followed in 1937 and 1954, each time closer. On the 6th of April 1956, a saucer landed on her farm, and a tall, fair-haired being named Akon appeared. He took her aboard, introduced his crew, and showed her Meton, his planet near Proxima Centauri. Elizabeth later claimed she loved Akon, visited Meton, and gave birth to their son, who stayed there. She wrote it in Beyond the Light Barrier and spoke until 1994. The Vanished Logger.
I felt like there was something seriously wrong. It was only a matter of seconds before I realized that these weren't human doctors. This was an alien face.
In November 1975, Travis Walton was working with 6 other loggers near Snowflake, Arizona. While driving through the woods, they saw a strange glow ahead. In a clearing, they found a silent, disc-shaped craft giving off golden light. Travis ran toward it, but a blue beam hit him and knocked him down. His frightened crewmates drove away. When they came back, Travis was missing. Police doubted their story and suspected murder. Around 200 people searched for 5 days with no success. Then Travis called from a payphone, confused and shaken, saying he had woken inside the craft with non-human beings. Taken by bizarre beings.
Last October, in the quiet Mississippi town of Pascagoula, 2 local men confronted authorities with a rather bizarre story. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by 3 unearthly creatures.
On the 11th of October 1973, Charles Hickson, Calvin Parker were fishing beside the Pascagoula River in Mississippi when a craft with blue flashing lights came down and hovered near the ground. 3 strange, bulky creatures with pointed features and webbed hands floated out and grabbed them.
What did you see? They were shorter than me. I'd say about 5'2" or 3", and they didn't have a neck. Their head, it seemed to come directly to their shoulders. And it had something, it came out to a point about where a nose would be, and on each side, the ears. I believe that they looked like they were a little longer on the ears than the nose.
Hickson said a scanning device moved over his body, while Parker said he felt a shot and became calm. After they were released, both were badly shaken. They passed polygraph tests and kept telling the same story for the rest of their lives.
Tell me about the lie detector test.
Well, so that was run by Pilkington. Was it Pilkington?
Pennington. That they run this type of test about 6 times a day. And when they were asked to come over here to talk to these people, they had in their mind that it was just a big joke. And if I understand it correctly, they ran one test on Mr. Hickson. The machine showed that he was telling the truth. Then they run another one, and then the examiner, he began to wonder himself. So he ran the 3rd test, and he believed just what Mr. Hickson had told him.
Sea horror. A fisherman off the coast of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil was out on the water on 2022 when something surfaced beside his boat and began following him. What the camera captured was difficult to explain. A pale, slender figure with long, dark hair matted across its face and 2 glowing eyes fixed directly on him. Its upper body moved like a human, but its lower half disappeared beneath the surface. Fearing for his life, the fisherman fled. Later, he shared the clip on YouTube, claiming it was a mermaid. Hills encounter.
September 19, 1961. Bonnie and I driving home from Montreal. Saw a strange light in the sky, which changed direction, came in, started following us. In an area known as Indian Head, it came out over the highway, stopped in midair. And Bonnie got out with the binoculars in an attempt to identify this craft.
On September 19, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving home from Montreal when a strange light followed their car near Indian Head, New Hampshire. Barney looked through binoculars and saw a flat-topped craft hovering with a large window. Behind it, figures stared down at him. He said they looked almost human, with wide eyes, small noses, thin mouths, no hair, and no visible ears.
I mean, you can see they're very human appearing. Yeah. Only here, the eyes are wider spaced than ours.
Okay.
See?
Right.
The nose is smaller and a thin slit for a mouth. No hair, no protruding part of the ear.
Their car stalled and they were taken aboard. They said medical tests were done and a star map was shown. Betty passed a lie detector test.
The flat crown and the brim, that's what it was shaped like. And then along one side, it had a big picture window. And it had dividers in it. And as he's looking up at it, and he could see people standing in the windows looking down at him, and the craft began to descend, and he had the feeling they were trying to kidnap him.
The masked pursuer.
When I saw him in the United States, or when I was staying in his houses in the United States, there was no indication. Now, I went there with the sole purpose of saying to him that because he had been convicted, it was inappropriate for us to be seen together.
On a Wednesday evening in May 2026, Prince Andrew was walking his dogs near the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. A man wearing a balaclava got out of a car and ran toward him while shouting. Andrew was with a private bodyguard, so he ran to his vehicle and drove away as the man chased him. Police arrested the suspect and searched his car for weapons. The incident raised concerns about Andrew's security. After his 2019 Newsnight interview about Jeffrey Epstein, his police protection was removed. King Charles reduced private security support, and now he lives at Marsh Farm with limited protection.
In terms of the late Queen Elizabeth, who, as say, her 100th birthday coming up later this month, and King Charles, what is your belief? What did they know about Andrew, and when did they know it?
It's a very big question. I mean, I can only tell what I know, and what I know is that, maybe a couple of years after, when it was getting very serious in terms of 2013, 2014, I know that the King and the then Prince of Wales, but the King now, and Andrew had a conversation in which he gave guarantees that he had not been involved in, I'll quote him, anything untoward.
Heaven's Gate.
We're going to talk to you about the most urgent thing that is on our mind, and what we suspect is the most urgent thing on the minds of those who will connect with us. Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
Marshall Applewhite stood in front of a camera and told the world that Earth was about to be recycled, wiped clean and started over, and that the only way to survive was to leave with him. He claimed to be the returned mind of Jesus Christ, sent again by a father who was not human, but a member of what he called the evolutionary level above human.
Must acknowledge my father. My father is not a human father. My father is a member of the evolutionary level.
He described genuine extraterrestrials as slender, genderless beings who communicated through thought alone. In March 1997, 39 of his followers took their own lives in a California mansion, believing a spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet would carry their souls away. Applewhite was also among them.
Now, most of the illustrations of extraterrestrials these days have been grotesque. Looked like giant insects or slimy reptilians or eyes so big that you could fall into them. And an extraterrestrial that we say is a genuine extraterrestrial is not a fallen angel.
Mysterious intruders.
All I seen was just what they looked like, web hands, pointed ears, and they was about 3 foot tall. And they had silver uniforms on. First of all, my mother's the first one that seen them. She was looking through the window glass, and one come up at the window. And my mother hollered, so my half-brother, he came in there with a double-barrel shotgun and shot him. But it just knocked him down, all it done. He got up, didn't hurt him, didn't faze him a bit. I wasn't but 12, so I just felt scared, really. We was all pretty shook up. If I remember right, we left and went to some friend's house for the night.
On the 21st of August 1955, the Langford family was relaxing after a card game at their farmhouse in Kelly, Kentucky. A guest stepped outside and saw a glowing round object fall from the sky, but no one believed him. Moments later, Lonnie's mother screamed from the window. Outside, they saw small creatures in silver suits with webbed hands, pointed ears, long arms, and huge eyes. The men fired shotguns, but the creatures seemed unharmed and kept returning. One even grabbed a family member from the roof. Later, police and soldiers arrived, but found only a terrified family and no clear proof.
The only thing that we did find was the family there, rather disturbed, very emotional, and swearing that something had occurred in the way of small, silver-looking people with big eyes and big heads trying to get into their house.
Saved by dolphins.
We heard radio reports from the mainland that there has been an earthquake somewhere in Indonesia. There were some dolphins jumping in front, and the dolphins were moving from one boat to the next. They were like jumping one after the other. My heart was pounding, and I realized like, hey, they're saying something to us. I signaled to the captain to please follow the dolphins.
On December 26, 2004, a 9.1 magnitude tremor sent tsunamis tearing through coastal Asia, claiming nearly 280,000 lives. Filipino dive instructor Chris Cruz was leading dive teams off the coast of Thailand that morning when giant whirlpools began shaking his boats. Then a pod of dolphins appeared, swarming unusually close and leaping frantically between vessels. Chris realized they weren't playing, they were signaling. He ordered his captain to follow them. The dolphins led every boat away from the islands before vanishing completely. Chris believed they would have been smashed against the rocks if they were close to the island.
We realized like the dolphins were leading us away from the island. The Philippines, we have folklore stories, oral tradition stories of like turtles, dolphins, like whale sharks, like helping human beings when they're in trouble, when they're drowning, or like when there's a shipwreck, they're coming. If we stayed very near the islands, we would have smashed through the island.
Reptile Council. Simon Parks was a sitting Labour councillor in North Yorkshire when he told a public audience that his legal father was a reptilian alien, that he had experienced hundreds of alien encounters throughout his life, and that Russian President Vladimir Putin had received a counteroffer from a group of extraterrestrials called the Nordics, who provided him with advanced technology in exchange for breaking away from American influence. He said Putin was previously advised by reptilians before the Nordics intervened. He held elected office the entire time he was saying this.
This is really important because it empowered me. I realized that I had made an agreement. No longer was it a case of them coming and taking me and doing stuff and dropping me back. So I didn't agree to go on a spaceship, or I didn't agree for an implant, etc., etc. But they have implication is that I have. Because I've made an agreement, they'll now interpret that in a very wide angle.
Aliens Experiment.
There have been depictions throughout various abduction scenarios that include the gray aliens and this larger, tall, insectoid being, very praying mantis-like.
In 1963, 17-year-old Linda Porter claimed she woke aboard a strange craft near Los Angeles. Decades later, under hypnosis, she recalled a small gray alien leading her into a bright room where an 8-foot praying mantis-like being watched and directed the procedure. Porter kept silent for nearly 30 years before contacting investigator Linda Moulton Howe.
I received a letter carefully written from Linda Porter. This led up to her sending me a whole lot of drawings.
She said the beings were not studying her body but her soul, trying to learn where human consciousness goes after life, while humans remained suspended inside cylindrical containers.
One of the drawings was of a praying mantis about 8 feet tall, in a room that was very odd, had a cylindrical object and sparkles of light.
Aliens Assault.
Huge thing with a big round dome, very dark grey colour, and had a big flange going all the way around. I could see arms sticking out of this flange with what I took to be blades on the top.
On the morning of November 9th, 1979, forestry worker Bob Taylor was walking a woodland track outside Livingston, near Edinburgh, Scotland, when he rounded a corner and was left shocked. Sitting in the clearing was a massive dark grey disc with a domed crown and a flanged rim lined with protruding spikes. 2 spiked spheres rolled out from beneath it and latched onto his trousers. He felt a powerful choking smell and blacked out completely. He came crawling along the path and staggered home white-faced and barely coherent. Police found 40 holes and 2 track marks at the scene, matching no known vehicle. His trousers were torn precisely where he said the spheres grabbed him.
It looked terrible when he came in the door, and he just stood at the door, and I said, "Have you had an accident with your lorry?" And he said, "No, I've been attacked." And I said, "What with?" And he said, "A spaceship." And I said, "Oh, goodness me, there's no such a thing as a spaceship. I'm going to phone the doctor. You must have fell and hurt your head." He looked quite shocked, and he was drained. He was right white, and his face was dirty, and he had a red scar here, and his clothes were all dirty, and his trousers. And then he told me his trousers had been torn.
Disappeared by sharks.
This kid jumped off!
On May 24th, 18-year-old Cameron Robbins from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, jumped from a sunset cruise vessel called Blackbeard's Revenge into dark waters off Atoll Island near the Bahamas. Onlookers threw a buoy and screamed at him to grab it. He ignored them and swam in the opposite direction. Royal Bahamas Defense Force Commodore Raymond King later described the area as heavily shark-infested. Video from the moments after the jump shows a silvery reflection near the hull that some believe was a shark, and he was never spotted again.
Oh, bye-bye! Oh, that's it!
Exchange Soul.
A new Harvard study suggested that aliens may be secretly living here on Earth.
Well, according to our next guest, aliens are already among us, and she claims to be the living proof. Kelly Tyler is part of a growing number of people that believe themselves to be extraterrestrials who've been sent down from space in order to help humankind.
Kelly Tyler was a hypersensitive child growing up in Britain when, at age 8, she contracted a whooping cough so severe that doctors told her parents she would not survive. She did survive, but according to Kelly, the girl who recovered was no longer entirely the same person. She believes her soul was exchanged with a being from Arcturus, one of the brightest stars visible from Earth, in what she calls a mutual agreement between 2 souls, rather than a possession.
The being that I now know I had an exchange with is from Arcturus.
Right.
So that's a...
Arcturus. Okay.
It's one of the brightest stars. You can see it in the sky at the moment.
It's like the 4th largest
yes.
or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
After the exchange, her allergies vanished, her intellect sharpened noticeably, and her personality changed completely. Doctors called it a miracle. Kelly calls herself a starseed, a soul from another star system incarnated in human form, sent here not to reveal other worlds, but to help humanity.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, Kat.
Yeah, don't worry.
What was the explanation from the doctor? If you were so ill and the doctors had told your parents that you weren't going to survive, you were probably going to die, what was the explanation?
Miracle.
So they couldn't actually justify what happened. You just miraculously started getting better.
They said I went back to school. I had to catch up on school because I was out for about 6 months. But I lost my allergies, I didn't have kidney failure, and also my intellect changed.
Mysterious visitors.
I was taken in 1985. I was in bed in the particular house that I recall with my wife, and we had 2 small children in other bedrooms. When I woke up suddenly and saw bluish light coming from the living room, and then I told my wife I need to check on this. She saw it also, and I was about to get up off the bed, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed.
Back in 1985, retired U.S. Air Force Captain Bob Salas woke in the middle of the night to a bluish light filling his living room. His wife saw it too. Before he could get out of bed, he found himself completely numb, struggling and sweating, unable to move a single muscle. A hooded figure appeared in the bedroom doorway, face hidden. Then smaller beings entered the room, child-sized, moving silently. Without touching him, they lifted him off the bed entirely and carried him straight through the locked bedroom window.
I see a figure in my doorway of the bedroom. It was a hooded figure. I couldn't see the face, or don't recall seeing the face. And after that, there were small beings in the room. They seemed like children to me at the time. You know, this was way before people were talking about little alien grays, and I didn't know why children would be in the room, but at one point they lifted me off the bed, not using their hands or anything. I just was lifted off the bed and taken to my bedroom window, which I had locked.
Unidentified flying object. A group of fishermen out on the North Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, were going about their catch when one of them noticed something unusual hovering low in the cloudy sky. It was a large oval-shaped metallic craft, smooth and dome-like, with a single dark opening on its underside, glowing faintly at its edges. It descended slowly toward the water's surface, stirring up waves beneath it before slipping below the surface and vanishing completely. One of the men filmed the moment and posted it on Twitter, calling it a UAP that entered the ocean as it belonged there. Skyborn child. On the night of October 15, 1957, 23-year-old Brazilian farmer Antonio Villas-Boas was plowing his field alone near São Francisco de Sales, Minas Gerais, when an egg-shaped craft descended from the sky and landed meters from his tractor. The engine ran off instantly. 4 suited beings grabbed him and carried him aboard. Inside, they drew red fluid from his chin using suction tubes, covered him in a clear liquid, and left him alone in a room pumping grey smoke that made him sick. Then, a woman entered, pale-skinned, blonde, with elongated blue eyes and a pointed chin. Before she left, she pointed to her stomach, then to him, then slowly toward the sky, and he could not understand what she was trying to say. Plane abduction. Glenn Miller was one of the most famous musicians of the late 1930s and early 1940s. At the peak of his career, he left show business and joined the military, leading the U.S. Air Force Band overseas. On the 15th of December, 1944, he boarded a plane in England headed to Paris, but it never arrived. The aircraft disappeared over the English Channel, and no official wreckage was found. In 1987, an English fisherman pulled up wreckage he later believed matched Miller's missing plane.
In 1987, trawling in the English Channel, he pulled up an airplane wreck that he later realized looked like the kind of airplane that Glenn Miller disappeared in.
He recorded the location, making it the strongest lead in the unresolved mystery. Twins abduction.
Debbie came in and they put her next to me behind the screen. I heard some noises. There was some light that went over us. They were doing some kind of X-ray or something.
On June 9th, 2024, sisters Audrey and Debbie Hewins, who claim to have been visited by alien beings since childhood, described their most disturbing encounter yet. Both were taken aboard a craft, where they were separated by a screen, while something resembling an X-ray procedure was performed overhead. Audrey recalled seeing rows of cylinders filled with liquid, each containing what appeared to be grey human hybrid infants in artificial gestation chambers. Debbie woke mid-procedure on a table, feeling a scraping sensation near her ovary and panicked. Both sisters woke the following morning sore and disoriented. Doctors later found unexplained internal scarring in both women that they could not account for.
I don't know if people would be able to deal with remembering the whole entire procedure because it's traumatic. They can, make your heart stop. They can control our body movements.
Sisters witnessed alien. On a Friday morning in 1954, sisters Edith Jacobson and Arce Solvang were picking berries on the mountain of Ulet near Mosjøen in Nordland, Norway, when a calm, dark-haired man in a khaki jumpsuit approached them. He spoke in a soft, melodic language unlike anything either sister had heard. Unable to communicate verbally, he drew circles on a grey mirror-like surface, gestured toward the sky, then led them across the bog to a grey-blue disc-shaped craft, roughly 3 meters wide. He climbed inside, waved, sealed the hatch, and the object hummed softly before rotating upward and vanishing at tremendous speed. The sisters told no one initially, but the story leaked through Arce's husband. What followed was months of public ridicule, police questioning, and relentless media attention. Deep sea encounter. Dr. Paul Robertson was exploring the deep sea inhabitants 7 years ago. He was inside the submarine when he experienced something disturbing. Some bizarre creature collided with the submarine, but only its hand was captured in the CCTV camera. The mysterious thing about the creature was the resemblance of its hand to human hands, with the same 5 fingers and palm. Dr. Paul claimed that he saw a real mermaid. He might be right, as the ocean remains largely unexplored and the mermaids really do exist.
What did you think when you saw this and when you filmed it at the time?
Well, I looked at it and I just knew I was looking into the face of another intelligence, another species like us.
Pod of orcas. A team of divers scouting spots off the coast of Santiago, Chile, were out on the water when something alarming unfolded right beside them. A pod of roughly 30 orcas was aggressively pursuing their boat, moving fast and closing in from multiple directions. The water surrounding them had turned a deep, unsettling red. Their captain, a fisherman with 23 years on these waters, said he had never once encountered anything like this in his entire career. Terrified, he floored the engine and raced toward the nearest island. Chased by mermaids. A group of fishermen out on the Gulf of Mexico, somewhere off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, had their night go sideways fast. What started as a routine trip turned into something none of them could explain. Strange creatures surfaced beside the boat, bizarre, rounded heads, arms that moved like humans, and long fish-like tails cutting through the water. Eerie sounds echoed across the surface. The men floored the engine and ran, but the creatures kept pace. They barely made it back to shore, convinced of one thing: whatever was out there, it wasn't following them by accident.
They're falling behind. Keep it up. Don't let up.
Tut's dagger.
So in 2016, they studied King Tut's dagger and discovered that it was likely to be made out of meteorite iron.
In 2016, researchers used an XRF spectrometer to analyze the iron dagger found in King Tutankhamun's tomb and confirmed it was made from meteorite iron, 89% iron, 11% nickel, and traces of cobalt. This was remarkable because ancient Egypt was firmly in the Bronze Age around 1300 BC, making iron incredibly rare. What made it stranger was the craftsmanship. No hammer marks, perfectly smooth edges, none of the telltale signs of ironworking from that era. Believers in ancient astronaut theory, the idea that extraterrestrials visited Earth in prehistory, saw something deliberate in this, a gift, quite literally, sent from the sky.
They used what's called an XRF spectrometer to determine the nature of the metal that was used, because iron was not exactly well used during the Egyptian period, especially during King Tut's rule, which was 1300 BC.
Strange disappearance. On the night of March 31st, 2006, 27-year-old Brian Scher spent spring break bar hopping through Columbus, Ohio, with his friend Clint Florence. Security footage captured them entering the Ugly Tuna Saloon on the second floor of the Gateway Film Center building at 1:15 in the morning. At 1:57, Brian was spotted in a small alcove near a side door talking to a girl. She went inside to use the restroom. When she came back, he was gone. Every single patron who entered that building that night was accounted for on camera, except Brian. His car, wallet, phone, and apartment were untouched. His best friend, Clint, refused a lie detector test and lawyered up. Brian had a Miami trip booked for Monday and was reportedly planning to propose, but he was never seen again. Open discussion. Recently, a strange story went viral online. It claimed that a man in Florida was kidnapped by dolphins and forced to help them build an underwater city. The post looked believable because it showed a mugshot with the Lee County Sheriff's Office logo. Many people shared it without checking the facts. Later, the sheriff's office said the story was not true. There was no arrest, no deputy with that name, and no dolphin kidnapping case. The whole thing came from a satire page called the Dude Humor Report. Officials even joked about an edited underwater investigation team. The story was a hoax, but it shows how easily false news spreads when it looks official and exciting to readers online. Giant water creature. On the 7th of March, 2022, out past Gulfport, Mississippi, a Navy patrol boat was riding through rough water when something massive rolled up beside them. It wasn't a wave. It had a smooth, pale white body, curved like a giant balloon pushing through the surface, with no fin and no clear head to make sense of. The crew grabbed a camera as it rose again, water crashing off its back before it slipped low and vanished into the swell. Some of them swore it looked bigger than any whale they had ever seen out there. Whatever it was, it never came back up. Nessie. A female hiker had stopped along the edge of Loch Ness in Scotland, just taking in the quiet morning before the wind picked up. That's when he noticed the water wasn't quiet anymore. A long, dark hump rose slowly above the surface, gliding forward with barely a ripple. Then a second smaller ridge followed right behind it. No boats were out on the water that morning, and nothing about the shape matched a seal or a fish. He kept his camera running until it sank back down. Locals who saw the footage later were convinced he had filmed Nessie. Sea monster. A deckhand aboard a fishing boat near Kodiak, Alaska, was filming the rough weather when something in the water stopped him cold. Through the fog, a huge dark shape broke the surface, curved and smooth like a giant back rolling with the waves. It stayed there for a few seconds, water sliding off its sides, before it dipped low and slipped beneath the swell without warning. He quickly grabbed his camera, but could not capture its face. After encountering this creature, he left convinced that this was a sea monster. Sea serpent. Early one morning near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, a Navy guard was walking the shoreline before his shift when something out in the water caught his eye. It was long, black, and brown-colored, and was floating with the current. Curious, he pulled out his phone and started recording, keeping his eyes locked on it. After watching this creature, he was sure that it was a sea serpent he had once heard about from his friend. Peculiar seabed creature. After reports of strange movement in the Gulf waters near Corpus Christi, Texas, Navy guards sent a camera down to check it out. 6,000 feet below, something dark was resting on the ocean floor. It had a round, hunched body with thin, spread-out legs pressing into the sand, and one long tail curling off to the side like a whip. It barely moved at first, just sitting there, before slowly dragging itself forward. They shared the footage with marine biologists, but they also could not say for sure what it actually was. Giant sea spider. An American submarine was moving through deep water in the Gulf of Mexico when its cameras picked up something strange walking on the sea floor. Long legs stretched out in every direction, easily longer than a grown man, attached to a small, round body. It looked like a spider, but no spider should be able to survive that far down, where the pressure alone could crush most living things. They shared the clip with marine experts who claimed that it was a sea spider. Shapeshifters. A woman walking along the shore near Cannon Beach, Oregon, noticed 4 dark, hunched shapes moving low across the wet sand. Their backs looked stretched and slick, almost like something between a seal and a wolf, dragging themselves forward in short bursts. She lifted her phone just as a wave rolled in and washed over them, and when the water pulled back, the strange shapes were gone. In their place stood 3 wolves, shaking off the water like nothing had happened. Convinced she filmed real shapeshifters and walked away without even looking back. Sea anomaly. A Navy guard was out fishing near Beaufort, South Carolina, enjoying a quiet afternoon on the water when something long and pale rose beside his boat. Its skin looked smooth and grayish-white, almost ghostly against the dark water, with a narrow head and eyes tracking him as it glided past. It had a long body with 4 fins attached to its sides. Confused, he shared the clip on Instagram, but the viewers dismissed it as a hoax. Leviathan. Along the coast near Cape May, New Jersey, a man on a fishing charter noticed something odd cutting through the calm blue water ahead. It wasn't a wave. A long, dark ridge broke the surface just enough to show a smooth, black back drifting with the current. No head or tail in sight, just a long and dark body. Out of curiosity, he filmed this creature and asked the viewers online, and they identified it as a leviathan. Massive crab. Foggy mornings near Cannon Beach, Oregon can play tricks on the eyes, but what a Navy guard saw that day wasn't something he could explain away. Walking his usual patrol, he spotted something huge crouched near the tide line, its shell rough and crusted with barnacles, claws thick enough to crush stone. It was feeding on something half buried in the sand, tearing into it slowly. Before he could call anyone, the giant crab pulled back and dragged itself into the waves. Mysterious creature. A Navy guard was out on night duty in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico when something appearing in a boat's light caught his attention. Two eyes, glowing a strange yellowish color, were struggling in the water. Then, without warning, it slipped under and rolled its dark, curved back into view before sinking fully out of sight. He never got a clear look at the rest of it and could not understand what it truly was. Sea carcass. Somewhere along a quiet river near Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a man out fishing noticed something pale bobbing just ahead of his boat. From a distance, it looked like foam, but as he got closer, he realized it had shape and weight, drifting with the current instead of scattering as bubbles would. There was no face he could point to, no clear front or back, just a lumpy white mass rolling gently with the water. He watched it for a while, waiting for it to reveal something, but it just kept floating, silent and shapeless, until it slipped back in the water. If you have any idea what the creature was, write it down in the comments section. Loch Ness Monster. A family enjoying a day of boating on Lake Champlain, Vermont, was heading back to the dock when something long and dark suddenly emerged from the water beside them. It looked like a slender neck, slowly curving above the surface before silently slipping back beneath the water, leaving barely a ripple behind. One family member managed to capture the strange sighting on camera. Having heard the legends surrounding Champ, the lake's mysterious creature, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed Vermont's own version of the Loch Ness Monster. Lake Van Monster. Tourists visiting Lake Van in Turkey were taking photos along the shore when something reddish-brown broke the surface a short distance out. Only its head was visible, smooth and rounded, with small bumps scattered across its skin and dark eyes that seemed to stay fixed on the boat nearby. It didn't move much, just floated there for a few seconds. Locals have talked for years about a creature living in the lake, and those who saw it that day were sure they had finally seen the Lake Van Monster. Giant seashell. On the 14th of March, 2023, a group of Navy guards patrolling near Key West, Florida, noticed something huge rocking gently with the waves. From a distance, it looked like a rock, but as their boat drifted closer, they saw a massive, ridged shell breaking the surface, grayish-white and weathered, far bigger than any turtle they had ever come across. It just floated there, barely moving, letting the current rock it side to side. They circled it twice before it slowly dipped under and disappeared, leaving them with more questions than answers about what it really was. Mysterious catch. At a busy fishery near Bayou La Batre, Alabama, a fisherman was offloading his catch when something unusual tumbled out of the net and landed hard on the floor. Its body was pale white, with a strange bulbous head and a long fish-like tail that thrashed as it tried to right itself. It struggled in circles for a few seconds, flopping side to side like it couldn't quite figure out how to move on land. Before anyone could grab a container, it wriggled off the edge of the dock and disappeared into the water. Shark. A man was out on his boat near Destin, Florida, enjoying a calm afternoon when he noticed a strange, wide ripple forming in the water behind him. It looked like a wake, but nothing was making it. As he turned to look closer, a grayish shadow rose just under the surface, cutting straight toward his boat. He caught a glimpse of a wide head and a long body trailing behind it before it dipped low and vanished. He was convinced it was a shark. Skate. A man walking barefoot along the shallow water near Pensacola, Florida, felt something brush against his foot and looked down fast. Floating in the water was a small, oddly shaped creature, its body brownish and rounded with a narrow tail trailing behind it. When he nudged closer with his camera, it gave a quick flap and slid sideways into shallower water. Curious, he Googled it and identified it as a skate. Strange carcass. A Navy patrol boat was doing a routine sweep near Port Aransas, Texas, when one of the crew spotted something pale bobbing in the waves ahead. It wasn't moving on its own, just drifting with the current, and up close it looked like a carcass, bloated and brownish white, with a long tail, a hard ridge running on its back, and no clear face left to make out. The skin looked stretched and torn in places, like it had been lifeless for a while before it surfaced. The crew pulled closer to get a better look, but they could not understand what it was. Later, it was handed over to experts to test its DNA. Bizarre water creature. A group of friends was out on a fishing trip on Lake Texoma in Oklahoma when the water in front of their boat suddenly stirred. Something dark rose up, just enough to show two pointy shapes on top, almost like ears, sitting above a long, flat face with bulging eyes. It stayed there, barely moving, letting the current push against it as it watched the boat get closer. After filming for a while, they shared the clip on Instagram, and one of the commenters suggested that it might be a hippopotamus. Frozen serpent. A Navy guard on patrol near the Bering Strait off the coast of Alaska noticed something strange trapped inside a drifting iceberg. Dark, twisted shapes stretched out from the ice like long, curling limbs, almost as if a massive serpent had frozen mid-movement while trying to escape. He kept filming, unsure if it was alive. Terrified, he could not move closer and left as he did not want any trouble. Unknown sea creature. A Navy guard was out swimming near Huntington Beach, California, catching a few waves before his shift started. As a large wave rose behind him, something dark unfolded just beneath the surface, wide and winged, almost like a giant ray gliding upside down through the water. It hovered there for a second, matching his pace inside the wave, before curling back and sinking into the deep green water. He didn't even notice that it was being followed by this mysterious creature. Later, when his friend showed him the footage, he was left shocked because it was too close. Unidentified fish. On the 9th of September 2024, a crew of fishermen off the coast of Biloxi, Mississippi, spotted something strange glowing beneath their boat at night. A long silver body stretched down into the dark water, thin as a ribbon, with a bright pink fin running the length of its spine. It moved slowly and steadily, curling gently with the current as they watched in disbelief. They had been fishing in these waters for the past 10 years, but had never seen a fish like this before. Some guessed it was an oarfish, a rare deep-sea creature rarely seen this close to shore. What do you think? Merman sighting. A Navy guard was on his usual shift near the shore of Ocean City, Maryland, when he noticed the water churning strangely. Something beneath the surface kept splashing hard, kicking up water like a tail thrashing side to side. He stopped and watched closely, and for just 1 second, a smooth, human-like head lifted above the waves before sinking back down. Convinced he had seen a mermaid, he shared the video on Instagram, but viewers brushed it off as staged. Dragon croc. Once you're done liking this video and subscribing, let me remind you that what you're about to watch is going to be bizarre, and we seriously need to talk about it. A retired Navy officer had gone down to a river in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, when he spotted something massive resting on the muddy bank. Its body was strong and gray, covered in rough ridge scales that ran the length of its back, with a long snout resting flat against the mud. Then, without warning, it pushed itself forward and slid into the murky water, vanishing beneath the surface. Its body resembled a crocodile, but the thing that set it apart from a crocodile was its dragon-like face. Curious, he shared the clip online, claiming he'd filmed a real dragon croc, but viewers brushed it off as a hoax. Cuttlefish. A Navy crew was caught in a heavy storm off the coast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Out of nowhere, dozens of small creatures came flying out of the churning sea, landing hard across the deck. They looked like cuttlefish, pale and slick, with short tentacles curling under their bodies as they flopped helplessly on the wet floor. The crew scrambled to dodge them, unsure if more were coming. As fast as the storm had thrown them aboard, it passed, leaving them staring at a deck full of strange creatures. Dragon washed ashore. A crowd gathered in Rizhao, China, after locals spotted something unexpected washed up on the beach early one morning. Its body was long and thick, covered in shining scales that shifted from silver to deep red, with a strange horned head lifted slightly off the sand. It kept twisting and struggling, trying to drag itself back toward the water. Navy guards were called in to secure the area as people crowded closer to film. Later, marine experts arrived and took the creature away, hoping DNA testing could finally reveal what species it truly belonged to. Beach crocodile. No one expected to witness something like this on a quiet Sunday morning at a crowded beach near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. As beachgoers enjoyed the surf, several people noticed a large, dark shape moving through the waves. Curious onlookers pulled out their phones and began recording. As the creature came closer, they realized it was a massive crocodile tearing into what appeared to be its prey near the shoreline. Authorities quickly responded, keeping beachgoers at a safe distance. After a tense operation, the crocodile was safely captured and relocated away from the crowded beach. Underwater ray.
Oh my god, it's massive!
A boater cruising near Sarasota, Florida, spotted a large, pale shape drifting beneath the surface of the water. It had a wide, flat body with pointed edges, almost like a giant kite, and a faint blue glow that made it stand out against the dark water. As the boat slowed down for a closer look, the creature was seen moving. Viewers online believed it was a giant ray reflecting the sunlight, but its unusual size and eerie glow left everyone on board wondering if it was really a ray or something far more mysterious.
No, it's a white manta. It's super rare.
Oh my god.
Two-headed whale. Early morning on the 5th of January, along the shore of Ojo de Libre Lagoon in Mexico, local fishermen came across something no one there had ever seen before. Washed up on the sand was a whale calf, unlike any other, nearly half a ton in weight and 4 meters long, but built like two animals fused into one. It had 2 heads, 2 tails, and double fins, joined together in the middle. Marine biologists confirmed it was a rare case of conjoined twins that failed to fully separate before birth. Tissue samples were taken, and the remains were buried nearby for future study. Port beast. A Navy guard was on patrol near a busy port in Corpus Christi, Texas, when he noticed a crane lifting a massive creature from the dock. It was long, dark, and looked like a giant shark hanging from the hook. Workers stood back as the crane carefully carried it toward the water instead of a truck. Moments later, it was lowered into the sea. To his surprise, the creature was still alive and immediately swam away as soon as it touched the water. Creature washed ashore. Storms had battered the coast near Wilmington, North Carolina. For days before a couple out walking noticed something massive tangled in the seaweed ahead. What lay there barely looked real. Its skin was leathery and ridged, torn in places, with a long jawline stretching out that looked almost prehistoric. Locals gathered slowly, unsure whether to get closer or not. Soon, officials arrived to examine the remains and agreed that it was a decomposed whale. Megalodon. On the 11th of June, 2023, a Navy crew was out on routine patrol near Key West, Florida, when something huge showed up just under the surface beside their boat. Its body was long and pale blue, with a wide, rounded head and faint markings running down its back. For a second, someone on board thought it might be a megalodon, a creature most people believe disappeared long ago. But as it turned slightly, it looked more like an oversized shark. What do you think? Water turned dark. Swimmers on the Destin, Florida beach were enjoying a normal afternoon when the water around them suddenly turned dark, almost like a shadow spreading beneath the surface. From above, a drone caught the full shape, a strange swirling mass curling through the shallows like something alive. A diver finally went down to check, and what looked eerie from the sky turned out to be a massive swarm of tiny fish packed tightly together. Fish like these swim in huge groups for safety, since staying close together confuses predators and makes it harder for any one fish to be picked off alone. Glass shell walker. One evening on Fort Myers Beach, Florida, a Navy guard walking the shoreline noticed something glowing softly and walking on the wet sand. Its little claws and legs peeked out from underneath, moving slowly across the sand as waves lapped nearby. It was a small hermit crab, but its shell looked almost like glass, clear enough to see a tight orange spiral curling inside it. Tangled mermaid. One Saturday morning, a Navy guard walking along a beach near Galveston, Texas, noticed something caught up in a pile of washed-up branches near the shoreline. But there was something far more mysterious tangled inside. Its body was a golden-orange color, curled tightly among the twigs, with thin, delicate fins spread out like something between a fish and a tiny human shape. He crouched down for a closer look, convinced he was staring at a real mermaid. River horror. A retired fisherman was sitting by a river in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, when he noticed something large moving through the water. It had a thick, gray body with a rough, ridged back, while its tangent-colored head barely rose above the surface. 2 nostrils and what looked like sharp fangs were clearly visible. He quickly grabbed his phone and recorded the strange creature before it disappeared around a bend. After posting the video online and calling it a river monster, many viewers were baffled, though some believed it was simply a wild boar swimming across the river. Giant snake. Fishermen near a quiet stretch of the Mississippi River outside Natchez, Mississippi, stopped cold when they noticed a long ripple cutting straight across the water. Something dark was stretching out for what looked like 8 meters, far longer than any snake they had ever seen in this area. Its body barely broke the surface, gliding smoothly and steadily without any splash. Onlookers stood frozen, convinced they were looking at a massive anaconda, though no one could explain how a snake that size ended up in this river they had been fishing and swimming in for years. Floating hood. A Navy guard was filming the open sea from the deck of his ship near the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. Far in the distance, something dark broke the surface. Small at first, just a rounded shape sitting still against the waves. He zoomed in as best he could, but the distance made it impossible to tell what it really was. If you have any idea what it could be, then write it down in the comments section. Strange striped creature. On the Batina coast, Oman, Navy guards pulled something unusual out of the water during a routine check along the docks. Sitting inside a plastic bucket was a strange striped creature, its skin marked with bold black and white bands running down its body, almost like a zebra pattern stretched over slick, wet skin. Its mouth stayed open the whole time, showing rows of small, sharp teeth as it thrashed and pushed against the sides. Trying to climb out, the guards kept their distance while filming, unsure what exactly they had scooped up. Out of curiosity, they shared the clip online, but viewers dismissed it as a hoax. Alienoid creature. On the 10th of June, 2019, a fisherman working off the coast of Guarapari, Brazil, pulled up his nets and noticed something odd resting at the bottom of his bucket. At first glance, it looked like a small alien, its pale, wrinkled body sitting face down with no clear features showing. Curious, he gave it a gentle poke to see if it would react. It did. The creature snapped its head up, opening its mouth wide to reveal a row of small, sharp teeth and a strange, gaping jaw. Startled, he stepped back and shared this clip with one of his cryptozoologist friends, who called it alien fish. Mysterious figures ashore. Early morning walkers near Gulf Shores, Alabama, stopped cold when they noticed something on the sand that didn't belong there. 2 pale, slick shapes lay near the waterline, their lower halves fading into long, scaled tails instead of legs. Their skin caught the light strangely, almost silver, and neither one moved as the waves kept pulling back around them. They were surrounded by stray dogs, and to keep them, they dragged back into the surf, leaving only 2 long marks in the wet sand behind them. Out of curiosity, they shared the clip on Instagram, where viewers identified them as mermaids. Giant octopus. A Navy drone was sweeping low over shallow waters near Key Largo, Florida, when something reddish-brown caught the operator's eye. Long, curling limbs spread out across the seafloor like a strange starburst, each one thick and tapering, moving slightly with the current. It looked like an octopus, but the size of this octopus shocked them. There had been reports of sinking boats in this area, so he was sure that this giant octopus was responsible for this. Open discussion. Now it's time for today's most mysterious creature ever caught on camera. On August 6, 2021, a naval boat was patrolling the Persian Gulf after several reports of strange activity in the water. Suddenly, the crew spotted something terrifying. A dark, massive creature was slicing through the waves, with a hard, spiky ridge running down its spine. One of the sailors quickly turned on his camera, but before he could properly point it at the creature, it slipped back beneath the surface, leaving behind only rippling water. The creature was so enormous and frightening that none of the crew had ever seen anything like it before. It did not seem to match any known aquatic animal. After reviewing the clip again and again, one of them remembered that the creature closely resembled descriptions of Godzilla, the mythical monster. Shaggy dark beast. Nobody walks up to an abandoned building expecting to find something crouched at the entrance staring back at them. But that is exactly what happened, and whatever was waiting there had no intention of moving. Dark, shaggy fur, body pressed low to the ground, eyes locked on him without a single blink. Not a dog, not a wolf. Something that sat in that category between the two and belonged to neither. It had clearly been using that building as its own for long enough to feel entirely comfortable holding its ground. He backed away quietly and left it to the property. Whatever had moved in there, the place was already taken. Towering, hairy figure.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
It was the size of it that registered first. Not the fur, not the stillness, just the sheer scale of something standing between those trees that had absolutely no business being that large. It faced him head-on while his dog went completely silent beside him. Several seconds passed with nobody moving. Then the figure turned and walked into the trees with heavy, unhurried steps. Like disappearing into the forest was simply the next thing on its agenda. It didn't run. It didn't react. It left on its own terms entirely, and the woods closed around it without a sound.
Oh my god! No, Ziggy! No!
Circling night beast. He had just parked up after a long drive and hadn't even touched the door handle when something outside the car made that decision for him. A large creature was already moving around the vehicle in slow, deliberate circles, pass after pass, closing the gap slightly with each one. It never fully stepped into the light and its shape stayed just out of reach of any clear identification. What it did not do was behave like a frightened animal. Frightened animals run. This one was conducting a survey. After enough passes, it turned and walked into the dark. Faceless, pale figure. The security camera alert on Michelle's phone from her Newark backyard looked routine until she actually looked at the screen. A tall, pale figure was moving through her yard slowly and carefully, covering the space like it was searching for something it hadn't found yet. She watched it move closer to the camera, and that was when she noticed what the face was missing. Everything. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, pale surface where features should have been. It finished whatever search it had come to conduct and ran into the tree line without coming back. The fence Michelle had installed around her property after that night is completely understandable. Backyard gnome. Every morning the flower pots were tipped over, and every morning there was no obvious explanation for it. The homeowner watched carefully over several days before finally catching the culprit, and what came bolting out of one of those pots was not any pest or garden animal they had a name for. Small, bearded, dressed in rough, shaggy clothing, clutching what looked like a tiny tool in one hand. It shot straight for a hollow tree trunk nearby and disappeared inside before they could process what they had just seen. Descriptions of gnomes appear across Germanic, Scandinavian, and Eastern European folklore going back centuries. Small humanoid beings living underground or inside trees, rarely seen and faster than they look. Owl-faced creature.
Allah Akbar, ada yang muncul tu bolo.
A hiker on a rocky trail in Oregon spotted a small cave opening in the cliff face and moved toward it. Before he got anywhere near the entrance, something climbed out and stopped directly in front of him. Large round eyes set in a face structured like an owl, long messy hair covering a body with limbs shaped unmistakably like a human being. It stood there long enough for him to register every detail of something that had no category in any wildlife guide covering that region. Owl-faced humanoid cryptids have appeared in reported sightings across the Pacific Northwest for decades, described consistently enough across unconnected accounts that researchers have given the phenomenon its own classification.
Hati-hati saat di hutan bolo.
Forest giant. Two campers in a Japanese forest noticed something large moving between the trees and watched it step fully into view before either of them had processed what they were seeing. Enormous, covered in thick fur, moving upright with a posture that tracked too closely to humans for comfort. It moved calmly and without urgency, the way something moves when it has never had cause to feel threatened in its environment. Then it turned and looked directly at them, and whatever composure they had managed to hold until that moment left immediately. The camera hit the ground and they ran. 9-foot pale walkers. A wildlife researcher set trail cameras through Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina, expecting black bear activity, and pulled the footage to find something that made the bears irrelevant. Several tall, pale figures moving calmly along the trails, each one standing close to 9 feet in height, limbs long and thin in proportions that matched nothing in any wildlife catalog covering that forest. Their eyes registered faintly on the cameras as they walked. What struck the researcher most was the absence of any caution in how they moved. Minnesota Wendigo. Two thrill seekers following unusual tracks through woodland in Minnesota in April 2026 assumed they were trailing a large antlered animal until the animal turned out to be something else entirely. Elongated, wrong in its proportions, carrying antler-like features on a body that matched no deer or elk either of them had encountered in years of moving through those woods. Rather than leaving, they climbed to higher ground beside a tree and filmed it from there. The Wendigo comes from Algonquin tradition, a gaunt, antlered figure associated with the northern forests, documented in indigenous culture. Himalayan ridge figure. High in the Himalayas, on the 4th of April 2022, a group of mountaineers pushing through a blizzard looked up at a ridge above them and found something already looking back down. 8 to 10 feet tall by their estimates, standing at elevation in conditions that would push most large animals to lower ground. It didn't stand passively. Witnesses described its movements as deliberately intimidating, a conscious performance of size and presence aimed at making clear it had registered them and wanted them to know it. The Yeti has been documented in Himalayan tradition for centuries, with physical evidence including footprints in snow collected and studied by researchers as recently as 2019. Georgia night charge.
Oh, okay, all right.
A Bigfoot hunter doing an overnight exploration in a Georgia forest had been out long enough to feel settled in the dark when he realized something in the surrounding trees had been watching him for considerably longer than he had been aware of. It had stayed completely still and completely silent while he moved around, studying him without giving itself away. When it finally decided it had seen enough, it didn't retreat. It charged directly toward him, fast and without hesitation, abandoning any concealment the moment it chose to move. Washington tree scratcher.
Oh my God, it's really doing it.
He was moving through forested land in Washington on the 6th of December 2025 when something near the tree line gave him enough pause to slow down and raise his phone. The shape of it read as wolf from a distance, and he approached it still carrying that assumption. Then the behavior took it apart entirely. It was pressed against a tree, working at the bark with a deliberateness that had nothing in common with anything a wolf does near human presence. No alertness, no withdrawal, no instinctive response to him closing the distance. It was resting against that trunk, in a position no wolf adopts, and continuing whatever it was doing, as though he simply wasn't worth reacting to. He stood there filming something that had fully registered him and decided he didn't require any change in its plans.
People will just say it's AI or something. Look at those claws. It's standing up like a person.
Mexico water figure. A group of teenagers exploring wilderness near Morelia in Mexico came across a small groundwater pool tucked into the landscape and found it already occupied. A figure was crouched at the water's edge, collecting from it into a container with movements that had nothing in common with any animal behavior any of them could draw on. They watched it from where they had stopped, keeping quiet, until it stood up fully and the group got a clear look at what had been crouching at that pool. Whatever alarm they had been managing until that moment left them all at once. The figure moved away from the water and the teenagers moved away from the area. Upright canine. He was in the middle of sorting his tent when the feeling of being watched arrived before any visual did. He looked up and found it standing between the trees on its two back legs, shaped like a dog from the body down, and like nothing he could name from there upward. Thick dark fur, glowing eyes catching his torchlight, completely silent. The dogman, as it has come to be known across reported sightings throughout the American Midwest, has been described in almost identical terms by unconnected witnesses across decades. Upright, canine, silent, watching. He didn't wait to gather more detail. Furless four-legger. Rachel was hiking through a Canadian national park in winter when something moving across the snow ahead of her made her stop completely. 4 legs, wrong proportions, and not a single patch of fur anywhere on its body despite temperatures cold enough to kill most unprotected animals within hours. She stayed silent and still, deeply aware that drawing its attention was not something she wanted to do. After she got clear, she posted the footage online with one question: whether what she had filmed could be a chupacabra. The chupacabra first reported sightings in Puerto Rico in 1995, described as hairless, 4-legged and wrong in a way witnesses consistently struggled to put into words. Wrong proportions. A hunter reviewing footage from his trail cameras expected deer and got something that made him choose a different hunting ground permanently. A humanoid figure walked through the frame, and the first instinct was to write it off as a trespasser until the proportions registered. The head was too small for the body. The posture was wrong in a way that no human walking naturally produces. It moved through that section of woodland with enough familiarity that it clearly knew the terrain, which meant it had been moving through that hunter's ground for considerably longer than he had. He pulled his cameras from that area and did not go back. Jersey Devil sighting. A ranger who had spent years learning every animal living in Wharton State Forest in New Jersey was on patrol when something watching him from the trees stopped him mid-step. Eyes catching the low light, sharp horns rising from its head, a face that didn't line up with anything in his considerable knowledge of that forest. He stayed back. The Jersey Devil is one of the oldest and most persistently reported cryptids in American folklore, said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of New Jersey since colonial accounts first documented it in the 1700s, described across 2 centuries of sightings with the same features: horns, wings, a twisted face, glowing eyes in the dark. Indonesian goat beast. A shortcut through the Indonesian woods late at night seemed reasonable enough until something came out of the dark at full sprint, heading straight for him. Goat-like in its features, but running upright on 2 legs at a speed that closed the distance between them faster than his brain could process what he was looking at. He had no time to think, only to move, and he barely put enough distance between them before it gave up the chase. In Javanese and Sundanese folklore, the Wewe Gombel and various goat-headed spirits have been documented across generations of rural communities, described as territorial, nocturnal, and extraordinarily fast. White-eyed humanoid. A search and rescue team deep in remote Oregon woodland had gone in looking for a missing person and found something in the branches above them that nobody on that team had any framework for. A pale face, enormous white eyes, mouth stretched wide open, half hidden in the tree until their torch hit it directly. The creature growled and dropped and was gone before any of them could react, moving through that dark forest faster than anything that size had any right to move. Wrong-legged wolf. A woman camping alone heard something at the edge of her campsite and looked up to find it already partially visible in the dark, wolf-shaped at first glance, until it stepped further into the light, and the legs showed themselves to be bending at angles that no wolf and no natural quadruped produces. It stood completely still and stared at her. Then it lunged, pulled up short of reaching her, and vanished into the darkness at a speed that left no sound behind it.
Tyler.
Jungle bear. A group camping in the jungle had their afternoon rewritten the moment something in the trees ahead of them stood up. What had appeared to be a bear moving through the undergrowth rose onto 2 legs and revealed a scale and shape that none of them were remotely prepared for. Fully upright, massive, moving through the foliage with a deliberate silence that something that size had no right to produce. It slipped behind thick vegetation and was gone without rushing, without any acknowledgement of the people standing frozen watching it. Alabama upright wolf. A wildlife biologist working through Talladega National Forest in Alabama spotted a dark creature moving upright between the trees and did what biologists do. He set trail cameras and baited the area with meat to bring it back. It came back the same night and stared directly into the lens with eyes that caught the infrared and glowed sharply in the dark. Built like a wolf, moving like nothing a wolf does. Gray wolves were formally removed from Alabama decades ago and have had no documented presence in the state since. Appalachian Pale Encounter.
Easy, buddy. Easy.
A search and rescue handler hiking the Appalachian Mountains with his dog let the animal lead him through a narrow gap between rocks when it pulled insistently toward it. On the other side was a group of pale creatures huddled together in the space beyond. The moment they registered him, every single one of them came upright and moved toward him simultaneously. He turned and ran back through the gap with his dog and didn't stop until he was back on the open trail. Group behavior in cryptid encounters is rarely documented because most witnesses are alone when they encounter something. A coordinated group response, multiple creatures reacting as one unit and pursuing together, suggests a level of social organization that makes the encounter considerably more disturbing.
What the hell's that? Oh God.
New Mexico Rake. A dashcam in New Mexico on the 28th of March 2026 caught something crossing a dirt road ahead of the vehicle that made the driver stop and turn around without getting out. Pale, low to the ground, crawling with a slow deliberateness that matched nothing native to that region. The driver left, and the footage spread online, where the identification came quickly from people familiar with the law. The rake first appeared in documented accounts in the early 2000s, described consistently as pale, hairless, humanoid, moving on all fours and drawn to human presence in a way that feels intentional rather than accidental. Balfour Field Beast. Something crossed an open field near Balfour and kept coming toward the camera instead of veering away from it, which was the first sign that this was not a routine wildlife sighting. Heavy-bodied, moving with a controlled deliberateness that felt considered rather than instinctive, built broadly like a primate, but carrying a weight and intention that didn't sit comfortably with any known species. Baboons don't live in that region. No escaped exotic animal matching that description had been reported in the area. Mojave Dark Figure. At dusk near abandoned mining trails in Joshua Tree National Park, a group on the Mojave Shadow Traverse expedition filmed a dark bipedal figure standing completely still in the distance and decided to move toward it. It moved first. 2 legs, open desert terrain, gone behind rock formations before any of them could close the gap, at a speed that eliminated every known animal in that landscape as an explanation. One hiker described the canyon itself feeling wrong. Sounds bouncing through it with no visible source. The persistent sensation of being watched from more than one direction at once. Michigan Tree Feeder. A hunter in the forests of Michigan looking for game came across something at the base of a tree that made him stop and not move any closer. Large, dark, doing something at the ground level of that trunk, either digging into the earth or feeding on something, moving with a focus that suggested it had been there for some time before he arrived. Nothing about its size or shape matched any animal he expected to find in that part of Michigan, and he had been hunting that forest long enough that unexpected finds were not something that usually gave him pause. Montana Ape Charge. A rookie hunter out in the Montana woods on the 11th of May 2023 had his first serious trip end in a way nobody could have prepared him for. A giant ape-like figure appeared without warning, and the shock of it caused an accidental discharge. The shot did nothing. The creature charged immediately, covering the distance between them at a speed that gave him no time to think or move or make any decision at all. The footage captures it closing in fast, before the recording cuts off at the point of contact. What happened after that moment was not caught on camera, and the account that accompanied the footage has never been formally investigated. Strange Bigfoot. A motorist driving toward Portland pulled over when movement through a shallow tree line alongside the road turned out to be worth stopping for. A large figure was moving through the trees at a steady, unhurried pace with absolutely no adjustment in behavior in response to the car pulling up or the person filming from the roadside. Most documented Bigfoot encounters describe an immediate withdrawal the moment the creature registers human presence. This one registered the driver completely and continued on its path without any modification to its speed or direction. That indifference is what made the footage unusual enough to circulate as widely as it did. Hillside Trail Crosser. A father and son out hiking in 2014 had their walk interrupted when something crossed the trail directly ahead of them and kept moving. The son got his phone out fast enough to catch the crossing, and part of what followed, the figure moving up the hillside at a pace, and with a stride length that covered ground in a way no human hiker produces on an incline. The location was never disclosed, and the footage remained anonymous, which has kept debate about it running across Bigfoot research communities for over a decade. Virginia clear sighting. A wildlife photographer working in a wilderness area of Virginia in November 2025 captured what has been described as the clearest Bigfoot footage of that year. The figure stepped briefly into the open, turned, and looked directly toward the camera, held that gaze for a moment with what the photographer described as apparent awareness, and then walked into the tree cover and was gone. The detail that gave the footage additional weight was who was holding the camera. A professional wildlife photographer with extensive field experience, someone who has spent years identifying animals under difficult conditions, was unable to offer any alternative explanation for what had been standing in that frame. Wendigo versus bear. A tourist hiking in California on the 25th of January 2026 was moving along the trail when something ahead made him stop and raise his camera. Two figures in the middle of the path, one of them a bear, were engaged with each other in a way that took a moment to fully register because the other one was standing upright, bipedal, elongated, built nothing like any animal that shares woodland with a bear in that state. And it wasn't running, it was fighting back. Both of them fully committed, neither retreating, the kind of confrontation that has no place in any wildlife encounter documented in that region. He filmed from a distance and stayed there. Spider human. He was standing at the roadside waiting for a lift when something in the dirt nearby caught his eye and made him look twice. Small enough to miss at a glance, but wrong enough that once he saw it, he couldn't look away. He pulled his phone out slowly and started filming from exactly where he stood, not moving a single step closer. The lower half of it carried the structure of a spider, legs and all. The upper half belonged to nothing in that category or any other. Its size alone ruled out every recorded arachnid species immediately. He kept the camera on it and kept his distance. Mississippi Sasquatch.
Oh, that's Bigfoot.
She had gone out to the wooded hillside behind the cabin to collect firewood and had nearly filled her arms when something moving across a clearing in the distance made her stop completely. She stood still and watched it for a moment before reaching for her phone, trying to make sense of what her eyes were telling her. Tall, upright, crossing open ground on two legs with a stride that covered the clearing at a pace that made the distance between them feel considerably smaller than it was. She filmed what she could from where she stood. The silhouette was clear enough that when she shared the footage, the response was immediate and largely in agreement. Shoreline goblins. An early morning walk along a Chilean beach on the 30th of March 2026 was going completely normally until the couple noticed a group of small figures gathered at the waterline ahead of them. From down the beach, the working assumption was monkeys, reasonable enough at that distance in that light. Closing the gap between them removed that explanation and didn't immediately replace it with anything better. No tails, nothing that matched any primate feature. And they were organized in a way that animals foraging individually simply are not. They were pulling something large from the surf together, coordinating around it with a shared purpose that suggested this wasn't their first time on that beach at that hour. Shadow figure. They were walking through a wooded area in the UK on what had been an entirely unremarkable evening when both of them stopped at exactly the same moment. Something was standing in front of them that hadn't been there a second before. No sound of approach, no movement from any direction, no gradual appearance out of the dark. It was simply there, a shadow-like figure with no visible source, occupying space on a path that had been completely clear moments earlier. It didn't move toward them, and it didn't speak, and the encounter ended as abruptly as it had begun. Ohio hammock sitter. A ranch owner taking a walk through forest on his Ohio property had to stop when something between the trees blocked his path in a way he wasn't prepared for. Strung between two trunks in a remote section of that woodland was what appeared to be a hammock, and sitting in it, legs crossed, completely settled, was a figure that gave every impression of having been there for a considerable amount of time. He filmed it before doing anything else, which, given what he was looking at, was probably the right instinct. Virginia skeleton. On the 31st of March, 2026, a birdwatcher moving through the woods of West Virginia had his attention on the canopy when something at eye level in the branches pulled his focus down. A skeletal figure, thin enough to blend almost completely into the surrounding trees, was partially concealed in the branches ahead of him. He studied it for a moment before the detail that unsettled him most registered. It was already facing his direction. Before he had noticed it, before he had slowed down or made any sound, whatever was in those branches had already oriented itself toward him. Panama backyard. A man in Panama began posting videos online after something landed in his backyard that he described as a meteor-like rock, and what developed from it in the days that followed was what made the footage spread as fast as it did. The object had begun to grow, visibly, rapidly, behaving in a way that suggested it was alive and continuing to develop at a rate that had no natural parallel he could identify. Then the posts took a different tone. He stated that after sharing the footage, he had started receiving threats he couldn't trace and had developed the strong conviction that he was being watched by people he believed worked for a government agency. Scarecrow cryptid. A Mississippi farmer sat down to review drone footage from his field on the evening of the 3rd of May, 2026, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. His scarecrow had been standing in the same position in that field for months, familiar enough that his eye passed over it automatically. Then something about the shape in the footage made him slow the playback down. The posture was different, subtle enough that he questioned himself at first, but wrong enough in enough small ways that the longer he watched, the less he could convince himself it was the same setup he had placed there. Across different points in the recording, the figure appeared to have shifted position. He walked that field the next morning before anything else. Open discussion of the day. A subscriber sent this in, and it is one of the more quietly unsettling pieces of footage in this entire compilation. Michigan, 2021. A wooded riverbank, and someone watching from the tree line as a large red-haired creature moved steadily through shallow water ahead of them, big enough that the river didn't slow it down at all, moving with the kind of unhurried ease that comes from knowing a waterway well. Then the detail that changed how everyone who watched this footage processed it. Tucked against the larger figure was something smaller, carried or supported as it moved through the current in a way that looked less like an animal transporting young, and more like a parent keeping a child close in moving water. It never looked toward the bank, just continued along that Michigan River doing something that looked, in the most uncomfortable way possible, entirely familiar. That's a wrap on today's Weird Corner of the World. If any of this got to you, even a little, leave it in the comments. Like, subscribe, and come back tomorrow. We've already got something lined up that'll make today look tame. Thank you so much for watching.